Hello, YouTubers. Welcome to Latin America. We're in Unit 5 now. We're going to be talking about the Latin American movement toward independence and what your book calls the consolidation of Latin America, which basically means the uniting of, the coming together, and getting rid of those imperial or colonial overlords from Europe. So how did this happen? How did these Latin American countries become independent countries during this time period? And it's one of the most critical features of the time period, 1750 to 1900, how Latin America went from colonial possessions of Europe to independent countries. So there were some key features that kind of triggered this event, which it wasn't one event, it was a series of revolutionary battles in order to gain independence for these different countries in Latin America. But kind of the key features that brought this together, the four big reasons. We kind of went over this in class, and your book asks you and points out some other ones, but let's kind of go over them. First of all, the American Revolution just north prompted people to start thinking about breaking free from their European colonial overlords. And this definitely was in the minds of the same types of people in Latin America, the Spanish elites who wanted to break free from the people in Spain. The French Revolution also served as a catalyst, and both the American and the French Revolution were inspired by ideas of the Enlightenment thinkers who believed that governments needed to be structured differently to be more of a voice for the people, and have constitutional power instead of absolute monarch power. Then there was also, one of the big triggers was the Haitian Revolution brought on by Toussaint Louverture. So Toussaint Louverture was actually not a Creole. He wasn't one of the military elites or one of the French elites or the Spanish elites. He was a former slave who was able to lead a slave rebellion in Haiti in order to gain independence. One of the first Latin American countries to gain independence was Haiti in 1804. So Toussaint Louverture led Haitian independence. It was notable and he was significant because this was kind of the impetus to start all these other Latin American revolutions which followed right afterwards. So Haiti was first and everyone came after. One of the key differences, though, was that Toussaint Louverture led a slave rebellion, and the island was dominated by workers who were slaves. Most of the other political revolutions that happened in Latin America were more similar to the American Revolution in that they weren't led by the slaves or the lower classes. They were led by the elites who were looking for they were looking to rule themselves autonomously without the European powers in charge. So quickly, some independence movements occurred, and mainly as a kind of a fourth reason why they started or why they were able to gain independence was because of Napoleon in France. Napoleon was, if we remember from our last chapter, Napoleon was moving quickly to kind of conquer other areas of Europe, and importantly, he invaded Portugal and Spain and put a government in charge of Portugal and Spain, which drew the attention of Portugal and Spain away from their colonies in the Americas and into internal affairs, which was basically fighting against France and Napoleon's forces. So this led the Latin American Creoles to begin movements for independence. So let's look quickly at Mexico and how did Mexico gain their independence. Mexico's independence movement was kind of simmering, and one of the main leaders who was looking for independence more for social reasons was Father Miguel de Hidalgo. Father Miguel de Hidalgo was actually more looking for social equality and benefits for the people rather than the elites. And most of the political elites in Mexico at the time wanted independence, but they didn't necessarily want a social revolution, which would have overthrown their power structure. And so while Father Hidalgo was the one who kind of started the Mexican movement for independence, his ideals were not achieved right away, but Mexico did gain independence under a more conservative leader, Augustine De Irbide. So Augustine De Irbide was a Creole an elite who was fighting a movement for independence, which put Mexico as an independent nation, but it made them a monarchy, and he was actually named the emperor, which didn't last for very long. They eventually adopted a constitutional form of government. But the idea was that the power structure in Mexico was very much the same. The people who were the elites were still kind of the Spanish rulers, but now they were Mexican. They were raised and born, and they were looking at their own independent movements as legitimate there, instead of having European leaders telling them what to do. So that's Hidalgo and Iturbide and their importance in Mexico. Now, further down south in South America, there's two very important figures for independence movements there. So in the north of South America was Simone Bolivar. So Simone Bolivar was a Creole. He was educated. He was an elite. He was from a wealthy family, and very much believed in the independence of the Americas from Spain, made it his life's mission, and therefore fought many battles, revolutionary battles against royal forces, gained massive Creole support for his cause, and eventually, with the help of others, achieved independence for these regions in South America. He teamed up with José de San Martin. San Martin was another Creole, a wealthy Creole, who led independence movements further to the south. So, but they did meet up. Bolivar and Martin met up and fought with one another. They had the same cause for fighting, which was to gain political independence. Now, the importance of this is they did end up gaining political independence for most of these countries in South America, but none of them ended up staying united. They all ended up splintering off into regional independent countries, and none of them really achieved social equality. They were more just political independence from Spain. So a good example of this is Gran Colombia. Gran Colombia was the name given to the entire region in South America, northwestern South America, which is modern-day Ecuador, Colombia, and Venezuela. They were all lumped together in an independent nation called Gran Colombia. But really quickly, local interests in each of these areas broke apart, and so we have what are the modern-day countries of Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador. And so this vision of a united, free Latin America was never fully achieved, but independence was definitely achieved. So there's our first few words and questions from this unit. I'll get into some more questions about further into Brazil and Mexico since independence, but that should be a good starting point. So don't forget to be awesome, and check out the new essays, the new DBQ essay video that I put up there. All right, be awesome.